Take a look at the world. We used to know who we could trust and who we couldn't. Now some people aren't so sure. Media has the power to shape opinion, as well as report the news. With the unstoppable rise of the internet, anyone can now communicate their version of reality to the world. The result is the increase in alternative versions of the truth, also known as conspiracy theories.
What we're looking at is a massive collective form of mind control.
It's not just a suppression, it's a jackbooted oppression.
But in a world where conspiracy theories are everywhere, who do you trust?
I can't imagine any Prime Minister standing up and telling us the truth if it's in any way in conflict with the establishment point of view.
Are some of the biggest events in world history really part of a huge power game? And if they are, just who are the people behind it?
When people say to me, "Oh no, they'd never do that," I say to them, no, you wouldn't do that. They would, because they have.
I don't trust any politician.
I don't want to trust any of them, no.
I think Tony Blair's a liar.
I think he spins lies to tell the public.
I don't actually think he knows what he's talking about anymore.
I think that this man lies even more than Tony Blair does.
Don't trust either of them.
I think people's views of politicians have eroded systematically over the last few years, and that's directly in response to the way the states have pursued various policies. Things like WMD, the way we've gone into Iraq, rendition, torture, Guantanamo, all of these things really do make people feel that politicians are capable of committing huge crimes and lying about them as well on top of that.
Saddam Hussein has got weapons of mass destruction and he's used them.
There is a threat from Saddam Hussein.
In a world where many people feel that they can't trust the establishment or mainstream media versions of events, another theory has taken its place.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah, I do believe in conspiracy theories then. I reckon that is mainly what is going on in this country.
There's more going on behind the scenes that nobody knows about.
I believe in the conspiracy theories as well, because we're only getting told what we want to hear. We should be given the facts of everything.
The world is complicated, it's uncertain, it's unpredictable, it's ambiguous, and conspiracy theories are a great way for lots of people to try and deal with all those uncertainties.
There have always been conspiracy theories, but they really took off when this man, US President John Kennedy's assassination, was seen on national television. The official story blamed Lee Harvey Oswald, a low-life loser with a communist past. But many people were not convinced. The rumours wouldn't go away, and so the modern conspiracy theory was born.
I think when it comes to looking at kind of, if you like, the rules of conspiracy theories, one of the first things you notice is that's always when there's some event of great emotional significance. People feel that these kinds of events need some kind of explanation that goes beyond the kind of explanations that might apply to lesser events. They need some big explanation behind them.
Now in the internet age, there's a conspiracy theory for almost everything. To find out just how widespread belief in conspiracy theories really is, Channel 4 conducted a survey. Over 1,000 young people took part, and the results are extraordinary. Our survey showed that politicians are less popular than ever. Class and religion dictate what you're likely to believe. If you trust your family and friends, you'll be less likely to believe in conspiracies. Belief in conspiracy theories is rife. But what are they, and just why have they become so common? To find out, we decided to look at 4 of the most popular in more detail. 32% of young people believe the government have hidden evidence of alien interactions. Most are basing their opinion on what they've seen on TV or read in books. But some believe that their connection runs far, far deeper.
They are definitely here, and there is definitely something going on.
All his life, security guard Tony Topping has had alien experiences.
We're dealing with something, another culture, another people. There might be a diamond object, there might be a flash of light. Sometimes the air will go statically silent, there'll be like a vacuumless atmosphere in the air, and you know that something's coming, there's something in the air that's moving.
Tony has seen and filmed countless objects that he believes are UFOs.
Well, people will say, well, that's a load of but then they're not me, they haven't had the experience, and I'm the man who's on the journey, and that's what it is, it's a journey. They're not here for tea and cake, they've flown over for a very specific reason and a very specific purpose.
Tony has clearly had some unusual experiences. But he claims that he has not only seen alien spacecraft, he has also been chosen to communicate with the creatures inside. Over a round of golf, he promised to reveal more.
People might think, well, I'm a weirdo, or I'm a bloody lunatic, but we're in a belief system that doesn't accept it's happening. You would not get the British Prime Minister nor the President going out on television to say that contact has been established. It's not going to happen. Our governments probably are fully aware of them, but it will not be reported in the media because of the oppression behind it all, and that's what disgusts me. It's not just a suppression, it's a jackbooted oppression.
Mainstream media outlets were reluctant to publicise Tony's claims. So, determined to reveal the truth as he saw it, Tony decided to publish his experiences himself on his own Alien Contact website.
I've got the Pentagon visiting, I've got the US Navy visiting. I come out with all this stuff, I start filming UFOs, and it's just upsetting the apple cart slightly, so they come and have a look at what's going on. I was walking back from the shops one day, and I was filmed by this helicopter that appeared from nowhere. And there's some fishermen on the canal bank who are looking in amazement because the helicopter is 20 feet off a street lamp and hovering in the middle of the road, filming what appears to be, well, I'm sure it was filming me. It couldn't have been doing anything else, and it was bristling with camera gear. So it then does this dramatic turn in the middle of the road, a car paps its horn because it's too low in the middle of the road, I'm getting my camcorder out. It's as if the pilot has suddenly realised I'm about to film it and starts to climb upwards and around me. I mean, I'll never forget it when it came over the rooftops. I mean, it just suddenly appeared. It was like out of a James Bond film, you know, it just suddenly appeared, like out of a movie. It was oppression. It was the prevention of disclosure, you know, of the subjects. That's what it was all about, really. They wanted me to keep quiet about these interactions I was having. There's a controlling esoteric element to our society, and the last thing they want is one member of Joe Public to start spouting on about unidentified flying objects and UFOs and all that kind of thing.
Tony is entirely convinced by his experiences, but could there be any other explanation for his beliefs? In the park, Tony had spoken of his difficult childhood.
Because I was different, because perhaps my background was not wealthy, and because of these reasons, it was very difficult for me, and I was bullied severely, and all this kind of thing.
Tony's background contains the kind of experiences that experts believe could make someone believe in conspiracies.
There's a tendency amongst people who buy into conspiracies to be looking for some explanation, trying to explain why we don't seem to find life as easy as we think it should be, and something out there is causing this. This isn't the way it should be.
No matter what the experts say, though, out in the rest of the UK, it seems a lot of people seem to share Tony's beliefs.
I think UFOs could exist. I believe there are lots of UFOs around the planet, and actually there are a lot of aliens.
If you think how big the universe is, then there must be something else out there, but I don't believe that they look like that.
I've heard a few stories from people in the know, and I think there is a lot of cover-ups going on.
A lot of people believe in aliens, but there are other conspiracies that are even more popular.
I'd say murder.
Murder by the Queen.
I think Diana was murdered.
Princess Diana was murdered by paparazzi.
I think it's more likely that she was murdered. It was a plot. Actually, I don't think she's dead at all.
According to the official story, Diana died in a tragic accident caused by the drunk chauffeur of the Mercedes in which she was travelling. But journalist John King believes he has uncovered evidence that shows that the official story is a lie. In 1998, John King was investigating reports of secret military bases when he received a mysterious phone call from a man who claimed he could help.
We used to get phone calls from people that we think, well, you know, maybe we won't follow that one up. But this guy sounded genuine enough anyway to at least agree to come to Avebury to meet him, which I did. And this person said that he ran operations and missions with the CIA.
Over the next few weeks, John's informant passed on secrets that appeared to come from the highest levels of the security services. Then, on their last meeting, he gave John an even more incredible piece of information.
He told me that he'd learned of a plot of an imminent assassination of a high-profile person. He didn't name the person, but he did say that it would happen very shortly, within days. He said it would be huge news, it would be as big as or bigger than Kennedy. I didn't really take it on that seriously until a week later.
The Press Association announced with a news flash at 4:41 that Diana, Princess of Wales, has died, according to British sources. The Press Association learned this morning.
Diana was dead, but according to the police and politicians, this was just a tragic accident.
She was the people's princess, and that's how she will stay, how she will remain in our hearts and in our memories forever.
After the secret information John had received, he was less certain.
Everyone was thinking, hang on a minute, this doesn't feel quite right. And yet the establishment, through the press and the other forms of media, were putting out this story right from the off. This was a terrible accident. Suddenly Diana, who'd been vilified the week before, suddenly she was like no longer the Queen of Tarts, she was the Queen of Hearts, the people's princess, we were told. It felt like there had been some kind of pre-arrangement, really. And the more the establishment, via the press, was telling me, you're wasting your time, this was a silly accident, a tragic accident, blah, blah, the more suspicious it seemed to us. And the more suspicious it became, the more that spurred us on as well, because we thought we were really onto something.
For a year, John looked at everything he could to do with Diana's death. But it was when he turned his attention to the Mercedes that she was travelling in that things started to fall into place.
About a year after the crash, I found out about a technique of SAS assassination technique called the Boston Brakes. It was so cool because it involved tampering with the brakes of a car, and it was developed in Boston in Herefordshire, which is where the SAS are based. It's like a little, effectively a little microchip transceiver which is implanted into the car, which overrides the steering and the brakes, and which is controlled remotely. As soon as the remote control is hit, the driver of the car loses control of the car, the brakes go, the steering goes, the car crashes as planned, and it's as simple as that. We know that Diana's car was stolen prior to the crash. We also know that it was left unattended for 3.5 hours on the night of the crash in an underground car park. No CCTV footage, no guards. It was just there. Anyone could have tampered with the car that night.
But even if the people behind the assassination had been able to take control of the car as John claims, how could they be absolutely certain that Diana would die in the accident that followed?
She always wore a seatbelt. It had become an obsession with her. But we know from the French inquiry, at least, that nobody was wearing a seatbelt apart from the bodyguard. But I've just found out recently that actually the right rear passenger seatbelt was jammed. This seatbelt here was jammed, so now we know why Diana wasn't wearing a seatbelt, because it was jammed in that position and she couldn't put it on. So on that night, she was being chased by motorbikes, other cars, the paparazzi. The car was going faster and faster. She was trying to get her seatbelt on, but of course it was jammed and she couldn't get it on. If she'd have been wearing a seatbelt, she would almost certainly have survived.
John thinks that he's proved to his satisfaction how Diana was killed. He also believes that he knows why.
She was just so powerful that wherever she went, the world's media followed her, and she was able to sway public opinion, you know, against the status quo and in her favour. And people like that are dangerous. They're loose cannons, and invariably they end up dead.
John is convinced that Diana was murdered. But it's not just the death of individuals like Diana and JFK that have attracted controversy and conspiracy theory. Sometimes the death of many thousands of ordinary people can have exactly the same effect. On September the 11th, 2001, one of the most momentous events in recent world history took place. In New York, 2 jets flew into the World Trade Center. Both buildings collapsed. Nearly 3,000 people died.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward.
According to the official account, the attack was the work of an Al-Qaeda unit, backed by Osama bin Laden. But ever since the attack, this official version has met with huge public skepticism.
George Bush is the biggest terrorist on earth.
I think this is pretty accurate. A little guy on a stick pretty much being puppeteered by someone telling him what to do.
I think George Bush played a big part in 9/11.
September 11th was definitely a PR campaign for George W. Bush to support his presidential election.
9/11 is without doubt the most fiercely debated conspiracy theory there is. Thousands are now questioning the events of that terrible day. But if 9/11 wasn't the work of terrorists, just who did bring down the Twin Towers? One man thinks he has the answer. David Icke is the world's leading conspiracy theorist. From his home on the Isle of Wight, he has built a global following dedicated to his interpretation of world events. In 15 years, he has written over 15 books that have been translated into more than 30 languages. His website attracts millions of hits a year, while thousands pay to hear him talk. David Icke has studied countless conspiracy theories, but for him, 9/11 is the most obvious of all.
9/11 was an attack on the human mind to justify more surveillance, more control, and the war on terror. Wherever you look in the 9/11 story, the strand here does not connect to strand there. And if you can connect that, then neither of them connect to that. And the real reason is tapestry of lies. The official story is asking us to believe that 19 hijackers, most of whom were incompetent in one-engine Cessnas, somehow managed to fly these massive jets so brilliantly that they did incredible maneuvers to make happen what happened. The planes were remotely controlled. Just by coincidence, there were war games going on, and these war games included make-believe scenarios of planes being hijacked and being flown into buildings. You've only got to look at the way the Twin Towers fell to see that it was what is known as a controlled demolition. It was as if you had taken the building and dropped it to the ground. That's the speed it dropped. There was no resistance.
So if 9/11 wasn't the work of Arab hijackers, then who did carry out the attack? Many who question the official version of events are quick to put the blame on George Bush. David Icke believes the truth lies even deeper.
I wouldn't trust George Bush to tie his shoelaces properly or tell me the time. So therefore, he was certainly not the orchestrator of 9/11. If you can see them and name them, they are not the real controllers. The people really in control do not put themselves on public display where they can be targeted. They're what I call the shadow people. They operate in the backgrounds. These people who are put forward to run for office are selected by this shadowy group that calls itself the Illuminati, the illuminated ones, illuminated into knowledge that the rest of the people don't get. A network of secret societies and interbreeding families. Now, as these bloodlines...
According to Icke, the Illuminati are a secret elite of ancient families. United by shared bloodlines, they secretly plot to control the world's population and further their own power.
You can name certain families. The Rothschild banking dynasty, massively, massively part of this. The Rockefeller family in America are massively part of this. The royal family of Britain, the Windsors, is part of this. Prince Philip is much higher in the hierarchy than the Queen. The Queen is, again, like a Blair or a Bush. She's the out there top of the hierarchy. But actually, in the hidden hierarchy, she's much further down. And if you look at the families that control the transnational corporations, that control the pharmaceutical cartel, that control the oil cartel, they're the kind of families that you're looking at. Where they want to take us is into a centralized Orwellian global state with a world government dictating to every country in the world, a world army imposing the will of the world government, a world central bank and a world currency controlling finance, and a microchip population connected to a global computer. What gives them power and the edge over the rest of humanity is information, it's knowledge. And all the time we are being indoctrinated to believe things that lead to behavior patterns that suit the Illuminati's plan for the few to control the many. If you are a tiny clique who knows how this system works, and you have control of the sources of communication that people are hearing and seeing all day, you can program an entire global population with this stuff.
David is convinced his theory on 9/11 is correct, but many others are not so sure.
David Icke believes firmly that 9/11 was an inside job, and not as a kind of a tentative hypothesis or something that should be explored, but rather as an absolutely clear, in-your-face fact. Now, this is a problem, because even if you could take bits and pieces of this evidence, for example, if you could take at face value the possibility that the towers were brought down by plastic explosives, even if that had been the case, you would still have to establish a chain of complicity between who planted the explosives and the government.
But David Icke firmly believes that 9/11 was an inside job, carried out by an all-powerful Illuminati, incapable of human empathy.
3,000 people dead on 9/11? To us, oh my God! What about their families? What about their kids? Ah, to them, pff, good laugh. I'm not kidding.
It's not just 9/11 that has conspiracy theories. Only 4 years after the Twin Towers were brought down in New York, London had its own attack to contend with.
This clearly was a callous attack on purely innocent members of the public.
Whatever they do, it is our determination that they will never succeed in destroying what we hold dear in this country.
Some people believe the attack was nothing to do with terrorists.
I think that Tony Blair could well have organised the 7/7 bombings.
Possibly Tony Blair might have known about them and might not have been able to prevent them.
Yeah, I think that Tony Blair would be more likely to be involved with the 7/7 bombs.
I think Osama bin Laden is more responsible for the London bombings than Tony Blair, although I wouldn't put the blame fully on him.
I don't think there are any conspiracies about the London bombings at all. I think they're out-and-out terrorist attacks.
On July the 7th, 2005, Rachel North thought she was heading for just another day at work. "30 miles away, 4 men had already set out on a very different sort of journey. Minutes after Rachel's train left King's Cross Station, a bomb exploded. Rachel was only a few feet away.
One minute I was on the train, the next minute everything had gone black. I was sort of starting to piece it together that the smell I could smell was explosives, that the smoke was in the carriage, and that what had thrown me to the floor had been an absolutely enormous force. And I think I probably did start to work out then that there had been some kind of explosion.
Above ground, London was in chaos. 3 trains had been blown up, but buried deep in tunnels it was not clear how. At Edgware Road Station, Guardian journalist Mark Honigsbaum was one of the first reporters responsible for trying to piece together what had happened.
When I arrived, it was total confusion. I could tell that, something major had happened here, but we didn't think there would be necessarily a bomb blast. We just didn't know. So I started interviewing survivors and asking them, what they saw, what they experienced on the train. One of the witnesses I interviewed was a woman who'd been on the train, who described how she, at the moment of the blast, the tiles on the carriage in which she was travelling appeared to raise up, fly up. She used a phrase like that. This is what she experienced, or what appeared to happen to her.
If the floor had flown up, then perhaps the explosions were caused by some accident outside the train. Mark filed an audio report for the Guardian website, including the eyewitness's account of the train floor rising up. Then, in Tavistock Square, a bomb ripped a double-decker bus apart. Suddenly it was clear that the explosions on the Underground were no accident. But by now it was too late. Mark's initial report was all over the internet, feeding the conspiracists' theory that the explosions might have been outside the train.
That report took on a life of its own. It was picked up by various conspiracy sites. So at that point I became quite disturbed that my report was being used in this way. But there wasn't a lot I could do because it was out there on the internet. I couldn't just cancel it. People had copied it.
Safely back at home, Rachel was trying to make sense of what she'd been through.
I had just all these memories bouncing around inside my head. And I decided to write the story down. I wrote my story as a message post, just as lots of other people had written their stories of what had happened to them on July 7th. And as I wrote it, I started to calm down a bit. And it felt like picking glass out of a wound. It was kind of painful, but afterwards I thought, I've done it.
Rachel's writing on the internet had helped her and the other survivors come to terms with the events of that day. But they weren't the only ones watching online.
And I noticed I was getting a lot of people coming from one particular site. So I went off and read it. And I was really surprised to see that someone had taken my original description of how it all went dark and the screaming and the bang and the evacuation, and had somehow made it into a story of power surges.
According to the conspiracy theorist, there hadn't even been any bombs on July the 7th. What had really happened, the conspiracy side said, was a huge power surge on the underground electrical system. Train bosses were terrified of facing corporate manslaughter charges, and to cover their tracks, they organised another incident. Only 40 minutes after the tube explosions, they had supposedly rounded up 1,000 actors to fake the bus explosion in Tavistock Square.
And I have to say, I found it sickening. I knew by this stage over 70 people from my train. And I thought, if this person is saying that we are either victims of an industrial accident who are complicit in covering it up, or liars, actors and stuntmen, then it is a despicable and disgraceful thing to say.
Journalists are as interested as anybody else in, you know, wide-ranging, exciting conspiracies. You know, we'd love for them to be true because it would be a great story. But actually, the truth is that usually the most obvious explanation is the right explanation.
Both Rachel and Mark are clearly fed up with conspiracy theories. But if a theory isn't true, is there anything that can explain why a conspiracy theorist will still believe it? Professor Chris French and Dr. Patrick Lehman are two of the world's authorities on conspiracy thinking, and they think that they might know what's going on.
As psychologists, we're not principally interested in whether one particular conspiracy theory is true or another one isn't. We're interested ultimately in a psychological perspective, which is why do people believe in these and why do people not believe in them?
Both Chris and Patrick strongly believe that some people are more likely to believe in conspiracies than others. Incredibly, they also think that they can predict who those people are. To find out if they were right, they decided to conduct an experiment.
OK, guys, thank you for coming. On the table in front of you is a sheet of paper, and I want you to fill that sheet of paper in now. There's a series of questions. At the start, if you can put a little bit of information about you, and then just answer those questions in the way that you feel. OK?
30 students took part. None of the questions relate to conspiracies. Instead, they test 3 other psychological factors that Chris and Patrick predict will go hand in hand with a belief in conspiracy theories. If you have low levels of trust in the people around you, if you feel alienated from society, and if you're quick to make false assumptions based on partial evidence, then Chris and Patrick predict you will be more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. With the papers in, it was time to pick 2 groups, made up of the people with the 6 highest and the 6 lowest scores. Now, the success of the whole experiment rested on how the groups reacted to a brand new conspiracy that Chris and Patrick had invented themselves.
The government is using mobile phone technology to track everyone all the time.
OK, so do you think that the government is using that technology to track where you are at different times?
That's the statement. What do you think about that?
If their theory was right, Patrick's group would be more likely to believe the mobile phone conspiracy, while Chris's would be more sceptical.
And this is the thing that we want to know at the end of the day, whether you'd agree with this or disagree with it or you don't know. The government is using mobile phone technology to track everyone all the time.
I strongly don't agree with that.
I mean, why would they want to? The government would be out in no time. The simple fact is the statement was watching everybody, and I don't believe they're watching everybody, but they can watch the people they need to watch. So
I don't think they do it with bad intentions or as a violation of our rights. It's a violation of our rights if they take advantage of it when we haven't done anything wrong.
But can you think of the huge computer system it would require to have every single person in the country's whereabouts on the system?
The logistics of it is completely incapable of being, and especially the government, there's no way they can pull it off.
It's way too conspiracy theory for me to agree with.
Chris's group were looking every bit as sceptical as the scientists had predicted. So would Patrick's group be any more conspiratorial?
I'm not sure if they bug conversations, but I'm sure they must be able to pinpoint you are somewhere on the globe to like 30 metres.
Yeah. And also the mobile phone companies can track where you are, and the police can do that as well.
They might look at people in general, and like if they're being normal, if their behaviour is normal. But then if they deviate from this behaviour, they might, I don't know, track them a bit more cautiously and have a look at them deeper.
They might not have a purpose to track everyone, but as soon as they have the opportunity to and the ability to, then I would suspect that they would quite happily buy into that.
It would be nice to do a vote now and see what you all think. Can you hold your phone up if you think that it's very likely or quite likely that the government is using this technology to track where everyone is all the time? Hold it up if you agree that that's quite likely. So we've just got the votes in, and all 6 people think that it is quite likely.
So how would Chris's group vote?
Is there anybody who feels that they think that this is a possibility, that the government is using mobile phone technology to track everyone all the time?
No. The simple answer is they don't do it.
How many would say 1, certainly not? Can I have a quick show of hands? OK, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 6 of you would say certainly not. OK, so when it came to actually getting the group to discuss this statement, we got a very clear consensus emerging. 5 out of the 6 people in this group thought that was definitely not true, and the remaining person thought that it was unlikely. So it's very, very clear judgment there from this group that they don't think this is happening.
The experiment was a resounding success. It seems that trust, alienation, and the evidence on which you base your opinions are key to determining whether or not you will believe in conspiracies. Patrick and Chris clearly think they've cracked it. But will the world's most influential conspiracy theorists agree? To find out, Chris agreed to travel to the Isle of Wight to visit David Icke and give him the results.
Hi, Chris. Nice to meet you.
Hi, David. Nice to meet you. I've been looking forward to meeting you. One of the things that I wanted to get your opinion on was some research that we carried out recently. And what we expected to find, and what we did find from a large-scale survey that we carried out, was that the kind of people who tend to believe in conspiracies show a particular profile, or they tend to. And what that suggested to us was that maybe the tendency to believe in conspiracies is there because, for some people, it serves a kind of psychological purpose. It helps them to try and make sense of what, in many ways, can seem to be a kind of uncontrollable, unpredictable world. Do you feel that believing in conspiracies does serve some kind of psychological function for those people who tend to believe in them?
Well, you keep using the word theory, and the one word that's not been used yet is evidence. This whole opening of the mind to this conspiracy version of world events has not been as a result of psychological profiles or whatever. It's been the result of people saying they're lying to us.
I'm not trying to convince people they're wrong. I'm saying, well, show me the evidence, convince me.
That's right, yes.
Now, when it comes to some of the claims that you've made, I would say that, you know, for some of them there is next to no evidence. I'd also say, I mean, again, we all have human biases. We all tend to be selective. I knew you'd ask me that, and I'll acknowledge openly I haven't actually read the books.
So you don't know the evidence, Chris.
I do know the evidence, because I've read about your writings.
When you've read even one of my books, then we could chat again, maybe. Because I can't take you seriously about there's no evidence when you haven't read the books. I can't.
Right, have you read all the evidence relating to the 9/11 conspiracy?
I've read enormous amounts about the 9/11 conspiracy. I've been to America,
at the end of the
and
day,
I've done my own research.
At the end of the day, you are convinced that there is a conspiracy behind 9/11.
Correct.
It was not, as we are told, a terrorist act.
No, it was a terrorist act. It absolutely was a terrorist act.
It was a manipulated.
How else can you describe it?
All right, but it was something that was manipulated by these higher powers that you claim exist. But on all of these issues, there are other points of view. I mean, for the evidence...
Don't believe what I say, then?
I don't believe what you say, obviously.
What's the problem?
Yeah, the problem is, I'm being open-minded. I can tell you what would convince me that you're right.
Go on.
You know, is there anything that could happen in the world that would convince you were wrong? Not just claim that George Bush or Queen or whoever is...
The man's talking crap, mate. You're trying to get me to conform to your view of what I should be to talk about conspiracy theories.
I'm saying be open to the evidence.
No, that's what you're doing. And you might be kidding yourself you're doing it, but you are.
OK, conspiracies take place. It's the nature of the conspiracies, and when there is kind of overwhelming evidence against a particular conspiracy, but people still cling tenaciously to it, that then moves into the realm, as far as I'm concerned, of probably trying to look at the psychology behind it.
I don't care if you've got a problem. It's your right to decide what you want to believe.
Right, and that's what I'm doing.
But it's all this profiling people and saying, oh, yes, he's one of them, so he's just believing it because it's giving him a way of seeing the world. It's all that stuff that gets up my nose because it's so song sheet science, song sheet psychology.
I think there is a problem with the belief system. It's non-falsifiable. Nothing could happen that would falsify it.
I've said it in my own books. I'm not saying that every detail in this book is true. It's as near as I can get it. What I'm saying are the themes are true, in my view. That's what I actually say. OK?
No, yeah, OK.
And are we finished?
It seems that belief in conspiracy runs too deep to be so easily overcome.
What you end up having is really a very kind of religious dimension where the conspiracy theorist has arrived at a perspective, not so much because of evidence, more because of the uncertainty in the existing framework of understanding things and the need to really have a much better and more certain understanding of the world, and not just of the world around you, but of your place in the world as someone who is capable of accessing the truth and capable of then giving that truth to others and ultimately saving the world in a way.
And they can't be shaken out of their beliefs. they are a bit like religious fundamentalists in the sense that they're pursuing a certain dogma, they're pursuing a certain line of attack. And I think being a conspiracy theorist is fundamental to who they are. They're critical of government, they see government or big business as conspiring against individual freedoms, or they see certain institutions as conspiring against them or against other people. So it's a particular mindset, and if you're in that mindset, if you think, I am a conspiracy theorist, then you're going to go out and look for conspiracy theories.
There's one part of my head that says I want to be down the pub, I want to be doing this, I want to be doing that, and then there's a part of me that says I need to get out there, get on that stage and deliver whatever it is I need to deliver. People should be aware of what really goes on in our society. And conference, my lecture to you today is called Excerpts of a Psy Warrior. How I cram 30 years of experiencing an X-Files world around me into one hour.
Tony is taking his message out on the road. John is busy writing a new version of his Diana book.
I believe wholeheartedly, after 10 years of investigating this, that Diana was murdered. And I think that it's important that the truth comes out.
David's website continues to receive millions of hits.
It is a nightmare world run by nightmare people. It ain't somewhere far in the future. It's unfolding now. We have a choice. Are we going to continue to go into this dark tunnel of control, or are we going to turn around and say we're not having this?
Rachel still believes that they are all misguided.
There never will be all the answers out there. There will always be questions. Life is not black and white. Life is nuanced, it is messy, it is chaotic, it is confusing. At times you can feel that you're out of control and you don't know what's happening, and the worst thing is sometimes you think nobody knows what's happening. And that is actually quite scary. But that's how life is.
And I told